I see bad toys. You go into a meeting now and everybody says that you got to innovate. You got to innovate. You've got to innovate. You've got to innovate. And I say, what the heck does that mean? This is the, one of those buzzwords right now that doesn't mean anything. You see it when a company has a down quarter, they say, we're introducing new innovations. I see it when I go into Toy Fair and I go, this is really innovative. I said, no, you did that in 1985 and it failed then too. And they say, thanks for your institutional memory. And I say, is that a nice way of saying something really mean to me? And they say, yes. So there hasn't been that many things that have been truly innovative in our world. It has to be something that's never before been seen, has societal and cultural implications way beyond the practical utility, is transformative on an enormous scale, changes life forever. There's no going back after these things have been introduced. That doesn't happen that much in the toy business.
Can you go back to that last slide and step to this right just a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. I talk fast. So when I'm talking overseas, I like the people in the simultaneous translation booths are constantly going, slow down! So there have been some really true innovations in human history. The wheel, that changed a lot of things. The sewers of Paris, when Napoleon got the sewage from not running down the center of the street and fully underground, that was a really nice innovation. Indoor plumbing, I'm very much a fan of that as an innovation. Screens, a lot of times, especially in the South, people couldn't have screens. And then, of course, moving into the 20th century, we have television and, of course, video games. And all of these things have been really transformative in the culture, and they've done a huge amount to change not just how we live, but who we are as human beings. So, a quick take on modern innovation. It largely comes from technology. A lot of the stuff that we've seen, this is today's 15-year-olds have never lived in a world without a smartphone. So I say that a lot because it really is true to understand how that's not really that innovative to today's kids. It's more a concept than a reality. Innovation in a lot of things, a lot of business I talk to. Facebook, their original line, move fast and break things. How did that work out for you? They are up against a lot of stuff right now. It's also disruption. We talk a lot, you hear a lot of stuff in the toy industry about, oh, this is disruption, we're going to disrupt something. And then they come out with the same stuff that they did last year. Now, part of that is because of the retailers. You go into a retailer and they say, we want something that's breakthrough and innovative, that's exactly like what sold last year. So it's always a little bit of a challenge to break through that. And we have a culture that fetishizes the new. Which is really, that's great, but at the same time, it's not always well advised. So I think that innovation is currently the most awfulest buzzword out there because it doesn't really say anything. Kind of like Beanie Babies and Furby, everybody's got to have them, but when you've got them, they're really not that much fun, and there's not that much you can do with them. And after about a week, they're up in the shelf, and the mom who called me and said, what do I do with my Beanie Babies that I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on? Who has an answer for that? But innovation now is something to be monetized, and this I see in the toy industry all the time. There are 75 pages of books on Amazon on people who are promoting innovation, and everybody has a different way of doing it. There's consultants out the wazoo. I'm also one of them, so whatever. But I try to be a little bit more practical, which is why we're talking about this. And then it's a promise and an excuse. If you read, I went through a whole bunch of earnings reports over the past couple of weeks, and most of them had the word innovation in them in some way or form. And everything from a toy company to an airline company, what is that innovation going to do? Is it going to be transformative? And Wall Street gets addicted to that because they love to hear innovation. They just love to hear that because it's kind of a buzzword right now. And so it's come to mean change, but it's automatically assumed that change is good, which is not the case because change is really agnostic. Change is not good or bad. You don't really even know if something is good or bad until you're in hindsight. We tried this, it didn't work. How do we readjust? So innovation for innovation's sake isn't necessarily good. Therefore, change for the sake of change is really ill-advised. So that brings us to, we are in what is called the what I call, and a lot of people call, the creativity economy. And what that means is people are interacting with brands in a whole different way. Brands, more than ever, are communities. I mean, you go back, think, I was up here talking about the rainbow loom, whatever years that was, and how that created a community. Rubber bands on a form created a community because of kids making and sharing stuff. And brands are communities. And what's new about this is your customers are really, really actively engaged and heavily invested. So that makes it hard for them to move off the dime. I always say, what's a kid going to put down to pick up your toy? And I say that all the time because it's like, if you can't answer that, you need to do a little bit more homework. Because communities provide identity. And that's really the most important thing. I mean, you see it right now in cosplay, in fandom, even Funko Pop. You know, people collect their Funko Pop, and even the president of the company says, our toys don't do anything, but people love them, and it creates a community, which is really important, especially in this economy where people are looking for identities. One of the things I talk about a lot also is that the mass market doesn't exist anymore. We have niches within the market, and they may be narrow, but they're very deep. And so if I'm a fan of Marvel, Avengers, I may not know anything about Deadpool. And it really is, it's becoming that defined. The good news is there's a lot of people out there, so you can do something profitable. So word of mouth, which was always the way that things got shared, and people, going back to the 60s and the 50s and even the 70s and 80s, word of mouth was always really important, especially if you're promoting a game. I tried this, you should try this. It was something that we tried to generate with Pictionary a lot when I worked on that. But it's now become content creation. It's I'm sharing on Instagram, I'm sharing on YouTube, I'm doing this. And so it's that that's compelling within the audience you're talking to that people are trying to address. So in many cases, though, what that means is your brand identity is not dictated by you as the marketer, but how your consumer interacts with your brand. Look at Marvel. I mean, Marvel's a perfect example of that, and how all of the stuff and the controversy that comes out around Endgame. Now, I went to see the last Star Wars movies with a bunch of kids who are really die-hard Star Wars fans, and I've seen all the movies, but they were completely in all of the hierarchies and the mythology and all of this stuff, and that was their bonding, and that was their group. And so they're the ones who are dictating to Disney and Star Wars how the brand is being received in the culture. Its influence, it really is a tool of self-expression. And one of the things I always talk about with toys is the three things you got is a chance to explore the world, have new experiences, and express yourself. And really, around products, self-expression is really important, a way of bonding with kids and how they connect with one another. And that makes innovation a very different kind of challenge. Which leads us to the rules. I have some rules for how to be a pragmatic innovator. First of all, innovation is not an end unto itself. Just because you can do something new, don't necessarily jump at it. It's market-based. The market does not move as fast as you want. It is research supported. You really need to know what your consumer is doing. And what it produces is inherently and essentially human. And really, at the end of the day, even though we're selling plastic stuff and cardboard stuff and electronic stuff, what happens is the play is here. The play is in the child's relation to the toy, to the app, and the story that they tell about themselves as a result of that. And I think we lose sight of that a lot of time when you have these Watch Me toys, where I always say, you wind it up. Okay, great, yay, do that. I'm going to go get a sandwich. I'm going to come back. The toy is still doing exactly what it was doing 10 minutes ago. Where is the human connection in that? And I think that's really something that you have to understand really well. So here's what innovation and Piaget have in common. This is definitely something that's very important to me. First of all, think of the market as if it was a child. I mean, your market is a child. It's not just the children's market, but the market is a child. I mean, look at the crazy things adults go out and buy as well. So you're either going to assimilate the new product, the new app, the new whatever, into what you already know. So I like adventure gaming, or I like fantasy gaming, so I'm going to try this new fantasy game. Or you're going to accommodate, saying, hey, I've never played that before. I've never tried that. I want to bring that into my life and see where that's going to take me. Inspiration is not necessarily innovation. I see a lot of great ideas that will never get to market. My favorite rotten idea ever, I was in Hong Kong. It was a 3-foot tall purple plush orangutan that was RC and it played Johnny Be Good. That's like my favorite toy, rotten toy I've ever seen, I think. So just because you think something's a good idea doesn't mean it's going to have any kind of market support. It's incremental. Especially, now the thing about the toy industry is 60% of the toys are new every single year. There's no other industry that does that. There really isn't, and that's partially driven by retail, who always want something new, but it's also partially driven by we've got a new market all the time. The good news is, when your market is toys, they've only been on the planet a few years, so they don't really have a frame of reference. A 4 or 5-year-old is nostalgic for pull-ups. Maybe strange food. They're not really consumers yet, and so that's a real opportunity. Everything for them is new. So I always have 5 questions I ask people when we're talking about developing a product or a property. Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to accomplish? And the answers to these can be across the board, but you have to have the answers to them. What is the need for this? Is there a need for this in the marketplace? What space are you filling in the market? I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies in a couple of minutes. Is it transformational, which is great, or merely different? Neither is bad. It's just you really need to know what you're doing, because don't come to me and say, this is a brand new brand that's going to change how kids play. And I go, well, that's really just a revised Betsy Wetsy from the 50s, So it's really, I see that a lot. Does your market want it? And that's really something that you have to do the research, because you can put stuff out there, and if your market doesn't want it, it's going to languish on the shelf. And finally, this is really important, and I know we've been talking about this a little bit, do we have the resources to move the market? And that's really something, I know Renee's probably seen this year too. We've been talking about it. In the toy industry at least, people are coming up with some really cool ideas, and then they put it on the shelf and it sits there like a lox, because they've done nothing to pull it through. And just one unboxing video on Ryan's Toy Reviews isn't necessarily going to move the needle on that. And I actually argue on some of those things that the child has the vicarious experience of playing with a toy, so they don't need it. So the problem with all of this online stuff is the metrics, and that's a totally different presentation and conversation we can have. So I want to talk about 3 items that I think are pretty innovative in their own sort of smaller way. I mean, LML Surprise, probably the hottest thing in the toy industry right now. What they did was that they saw that there was a void in the small doll market. Now, small dolls are nothing new. We had Polly Pocket, we had Little Kittles in the 70s. These are about the scale of Little Kittles. None of you remember this, but I do. They're the scale of the Little Kittles. And they came in a ball that you unwrapped. There were 7 layers of unwrapping. So you were actually participating in this phenomenon of unboxing, this cultural phenomenon, as you did it. Forget the fact that 7 layers down you end up with a pile of trash. But kids loved it. They loved the interaction. So you get a label, you get a different thing. You finally get the doll out. They've expanded that line to include large ones and the glamper. But what they've done throughout this is they've kept that unboxing, the characters throughout, and they really own the small doll line now. Mattel brought back Polly Pocket last year. It didn't really take off. It's really hard if you're not the first mover in something like this to get a piece in the market. Zuru has what's it called? 5 what?
5 Surprise.
5 Surprise. Yeah, Zuru has a toy called 5 Surprise, which is more targeted at boys, and it's a ball, but the ball is different, and you open it up, and there's little drawers in it and stuff. So it's still the unboxing, but it's more targeted at boys. Not to be gender prescriptive, but this really skews to girls. Crayola glitter dots. This is an awesome product. DIY creative stuff is really big right now. People are doing a lot of that, the maker movement, all of that kind of stuff. So again, this is not new. In the 1960s, Kenner had a thing called sparkle paints, which was basically glitter suspended in an acrylic base. Huge, huge hit. but messy. So they take, kids love sparkle, kids love creating, mom hates mess, and they create something. These are little, glittery rabbit turds. That you I don't know how else to describe them, but that you actually press with your thumb, and it doesn't get on your thumb. It's really fun, and it's really creative. It's very child directed, and again, it's shiny, because when you got kids in this target age, if a little glitter is good, a lot of glitter is really a lot better. And then finally, this is the most, I think, controversial one that's out there. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's called Creatable World from Mattel. And the idea is that it's a gender-neutral doll. Now, what I'll say before I go into talking about that is, these dolls are gorgeous. I mean, they clearly invested a lot of money and a lot of thinking into these dolls. But, the question I ask is, who are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? Because you're targeting fashion doll play, which is a 4-year-old who doesn't really think about gender or gender expression. So, on some level, they promoted the gender expression, but, a little kid's gonna look at this and say, oh, that's pretty, I can make her hair long, I can make his hair short, that's how they're gonna engage with it at their level. So, it's really important. I think that this was like a big, a promotional thing for them. They were really saying, hey, we're Mattel, we're on the cutting edge of the next wave, one of my favorite mixed metaphors, and they are really out there doing things, that they are relevant, and that's really their challenge. The challenge with Barbie right now is Barbie isn't a fashion doll anymore. Barbie's core age is 4 to 6. These are kids who don't understand fashion. They understand Dreamtopia. They understand, aspirational stuff like careers. But they're not going to say, oh, well, this is like what, Helmut Lang is putting on the runway right now. Which back in the 60s and 70s, girls played with these dolls till they were 11, and they really did understand what fashion is. So it's a little bit of a challenge right now. That said, obviously, the question, does our market want it? Sort of it's out, the jury is out on this. The problem with a lot of toys, especially, is that they're bought at the request of kids. So if you've got a 4, 5, 6-year-old, what are you going to do to make them want this doll? That's really important. And of course, they're Mattel, so they have the resources to promote it, which they've done really well. So, but when it comes right down to it and you're looking to be innovative, there are really only 3 things you need to know in order to be successful. You got to know Shakespeare, you got to know Dickens, and you got to know musical comedy. These are sort of the I Ching of life. You can get every answer you want from any of these 3 people. For Shakespeare, wisely and slow, they stumble and run fast. Obviously, very strong reasons make strong actions. And I love this last one from The Winter's Tale. How we were a fair queen, 2 lads that thought there was no more behind, but such a day tomorrow as today. And basically what that says to people who are developing product is, don't get stuck in the past. It doesn't turn out well for Leontes when he does that, when he says that. From Dickens, you don't need to read all this, it's from Hard Times. And basically, if you know Hard Times, it's about the conflict between art and humanity. And this is he basically saying, you can know all of this stuff, you can know all this empirical data, but you can't know what the human heart is, and you can't know what drives people. And finally, from Sondheim, a vision's just a vision if it's only in your head. If no one gets to see it, it's as good as dead. It has to come to life. And you have to find a way to get off the dime and get it into the market. So, that said, never forget, we are humans in a human business. And all that applies. And I took this picture in Shenzhen after spending an hour playing with these kids. They didn't speak English, I didn't speak Cantonese or Mandarin, and we just had the most wonderful time just playing and exploring, and it was just fun. It's one of my favorite memories of being over there, and with kids who don't speak the language, but they do speak the language of play, and it was really great. And then finally, this is shameless pitch. I'm doing a podcast with Richard Gottlieb called The Playground, and we talk about issues like this. We talk to various CEOs. But finally, have fun and make fun. Thank you.